So, welcome to another episode of The Tegan Show. This episode is actually about the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. Now, if you haven't heard of the Industrial Revolution, it was something that happened in the late 1700s, factories, railroads, all those sorts of things. Basically what it's meant for us, the consequences of that have been that we have much faster communication, and just in general the advancement of technology came from the Industrial Revolution until now. We're somewhat in a post-industrial society, but it's kept that legacy. So an increase in communication, an increase in transport, very fast communication. It's also, now it's very easy to survive, to keep oneself alive with the necessities of food and water for most people. In industrial societies, it requires very minimal effort to keep on doing this, just to put in the minimum amount of effort to keep a job so that you can then get food and get water, and of course that's led to certain things as well. So of course this is, from what I can tell, from what I've seen, led to an increase in obesity, an increase in sort of feelings of shame. That's another point as well, is that another consequence of the industrial system actually is that it has made it a requirement for there to be high levels of education in those societies, high levels of educations in schools, I mean, of course, as opposed to pre-industrial. It was only, generally speaking, the aristocrats who were schooled, and even then they were schooled in different topics, generally speaking. So this has increased all of the factors that I've said, increased obesity, shame, surrogate activities, basically, because it's so easy to feed yourself. Basically, people take on other activities to occupy themselves with, basically, because otherwise they'd feel terrible boredom. And of course, finally, actually, feelings of helplessness because of the regiments of the industrial society. And so one way that I've gone about sort of trying to prove this, or trying to find evidence for this, is by calculating the correlations between these symptoms that I've identified. And first of all, how am I going to find out what those symptoms are? So the correlation, the way I've calculated that, if this can be seen up here. Now, excuse any stoppages because there are mosquitoes flying about that are trying to eat me. So this is how you calculate the correlation. So this actually here means sigma, or this letter sigma in the Greek alphabet, and that's pretty cool. Well, I guess it might be whichever Greek alphabet. I don't know if it's modern or ancient. This x here represents any x in the on the x-axis of the graph or table that you're using, and this x with the macron, as it's called in linguistics, or I guess just a line over top of it, represents the mean of all the x points, and then you multiply whatever that is by y, which represents any y on the y data point, but it correlates with this, as in it's like an actual data point. And here, this of course represents the mean of all the y points. So for example, if the data point you had was 1, and that's the x value, and 1, that's the y value, you'd have 1 minus the mean, and 1 times 1 minus the mean. And you do that for the first data point, and then you'd calculate the next data point, and so on and so forth. And then once you have them all, you add them together, because that's actually what that sigma letter means. It means you add them all together. So here, all of just this will be added together. So as always, any x minus mean of x. And again, let's say, and then you square that. So, 1 minus mean of x squared, and so on, and then you add them all up and multiply that with this, which would be the same thing. Yeah, I forgot to put squared in. 1, because 1 in that data point, obviously. For example, 1 minus mean of y squared. And then you calculate that for the next data point until you've got all of them and you've added them all up. And once you have these two values added all up, you can multiply them. And then from there you'll get something from something between -1 and 1. They'll usually get like -0.9 or something like that, or +9. The closer it is to 0, the closer the value you get is to 0, the less the correlation is, the less correlation there is. But the closer you get to -1 or 1, the higher the correlation there is. And basically what the negative and positive means is, if there's a negative in front of the number, it's a negative correlation, as in over the years something goes down, and if it's a positive number, that means it's a positive correlation, as in over the years something goes up. So now seeing how I calculated the correlations, let's go on to the symptoms, and let's see the actual calculations that I got with real life statistics. So the first symptom that we'll be looking at is obesity, and what I looked at, the data I looked at was of adults in the US from 1999 to 2018, and the percentage of obesity. So it went from 30.5% in 1999 and 2000, because the way they did it is they, from what I can tell, they averaged 2 consecutive years, and that was one data point. So they'd have 1999 and 2000 as one data point, and 2001 and 2002 as one data point, and so on. So in 1999 and 2000, what they had was 30.5, and it's risen quite a lot, probably more now. I saw one thing, but that says it'll be 50% in 2030, but that's not relevant to right now. In 2018, where it was 42.4%, so that's basically very close to a 12% increase over the 19 years. Again, though, it is a bit different on how they calculated that. So if you can see the data points and the graph, you can see what data I used to calculate the correlation, and the correlation coefficient that I did find was 0.961. So 0.961, as I've said previously, the closer that it gets to 1, or -1, the higher the correlation is. So there's a pretty high positive correlation here between the amount of years that go by. The more years there are, the more technology, and the more the technological industrial society gets its grip on individuals within it. There's a high correlation between the years going on and obesity increasing. Quite high, in fact, but higher than that, actually. Going to the surrogate activities, I chose just one. I just chose just one surrogate activity. The prime example of surrogate activities, in my opinion, gaming. I mean, you've got to think that you've got basically nothing better to do, because it doesn't even necessarily help you advance in the society, which might be one goal that some people might consider to be related to managing to survive, but not even being able, it's not even related to do that, it's just pure recreation, because most people aren't making money off of playing games. If you see the data table there and the graph, you can see the data points that I used, and it went from 1.99 billion people playing video games in 2015 it went from 2015 to 2022, and in 2022 it was 2.95 billion, almost a billion people increase in under 10 years. So, excuse me, what I managed to calculate there, the R value is it was quite a big correlation. In fact, 0.9995. That's 5/10,000th away from 1, which would be a perfect correlation. So it's quite a high correlation between, you know, the industrial society and these sorts of things taking hold and cementing its hold. Obviously, it's already taken hold, but cementing its hold, and the increase in this surrogate activity. Quite astonishing. In fact, I wasn't expecting anything of the kind. This is not wine, it's pomegranate juice. And I also mentioned shame and helplessness, but I combined them because it's hard to get data on all these things, or on the such specific things. I mean, like, it's hard to find data for people saying, oh, I feel ashamed, or oh, I feel helpless. So the combination of those two, because I found both are symptoms of depression, really. I looked at depression, and specifically because I was trying to relate it in a way to modernity, and the way I found that was in adolescence, what I found, because I find this to be of specific importance. 12 to 17 adolescents, from, as in age 12 to 17, from 2004 to 2016, it went from being 9% to 12.8% of adolescents having major depressive, I think it's major depressive disorder, but I'll edit it because I don't think I'm specifically right on the exact terminology. That's quite a lot of adolescents, I'd think. And so if you can see the data table and the graph, I was actually surprised that that actually there wasn't that large of a correlation from what I could tell, especially not compared to the other bits of data there. That's what it seems to me. And I did the calculation, and it was 0.7817 for the R value of the correlation. Again, it's not nearly as close to 1 as, 0.9995, but it's still greater than 0.5. So I'd still say there is a correlation that can be seen, but it's not as great. Ultimately, I averaged all the correlations of the symptoms with the increase and the cementation, if that's a word, the cementation of the industrial technological society, and I got the average of that. So the average correlation that I found was 0.914. So this is it's quite a large amount. Obviously, it's quite close to 9, though. That's because there was only 3 pieces of data there for those correlations, and combining them all together, if 2 of them were around 9, then of course it would make sense for it to be close to 9. But still, I think that somewhat evidences, in a way, how the cementation of our technological industrial society, and because of course it always advances, the cementation of the technological industrial society definitely does increase these symptoms, these negative symptoms that I've mentioned. And I'll say here, because this also, this ends the portion where I talk about mathematics, and now I'm just going to talk about about the societal implications of that. Basically, of course, some people would say that there are negative effects, positive effects of the Industrial Revolution and our technological society and our post-industrial society. People will point to many of the things that I have pointed to, the things that have happened, the consequences of the Industrial Revolution, like advanced communication and advanced transport, and all these things, and a greater ability to feed oneself and keep oneself alive for most people, for a lot of people in industrial societies. But I would say that ultimately these positives are very minimal. I mean, for example, vast communication, quick communication and very ready and available communication is not necessary if we did not have the vast transportation, because otherwise most people who are friends and family would, largely speaking, be staying in the same area as one another. So there wouldn't necessarily need to be the communication, because you could go down to their house or whatever you say, whether it be a hut, if we're going that far back, made out of wattle and daub, you wouldn't have to have that communication. It's only because of the transportation that you need the communication. Obviously, there's been medical advancements, and that, generally speaking, is quite good, obviously, in a lot of ways. There are some negatives, again, because the pharmaceutical industry, in a lot of ways, only seeks to improve itself, and in many ways negatively impacts our health. The increase in corporations and stuff has damaged our health to the point where because corporations in general, like food corporations and all these things, they have hurt our health. For example, this is recorded, though I won't personally cite this, it is recorded that people have had better teeth, like naturally better teeth, in earlier periods than they do now. But of course now we do have, our teeth are fine, or not fine, but they're alright because we have dentistry, but there wasn't as great of a need for dentistry back in that time, as well as our health. A lot of people are struggling with obesity and diabetes and these sorts of things. As I've said, again, obesity wouldn't need to be treated because obesity was very rare, in fact, for such a long time. Even go back 50 years, and it's hardly as prevalent as it is now. So if you see that increase, I wonder what the increase will be 50 years from now. Well, if things don't change, obviously. And of course, mental health. Of course, people talk about these, medications, and these integrate that we can have medications, or that we can have. Our society is accepting towards this, towards mental health issues. A lot of times, there wouldn't have been, as many mental health issues for people to be accepting of. And why should one be accepting of the issues? You should accept people, but you don't want to accept the issues as even a part of the person, because that would be sort of making them helpless in that equation. And this sort of, the way that we have ingrained it in our society and in our minds has led to greater mental health problems, as well as, the way I see it, a lot of the medication you can get for this, a lot of times it does more harm than good, because it's a natural reaction to reality, and so it's not necessarily there is a chemical imbalance, but it's there for a reason. So if you're trying to counteract that, you're destroying something that's natural. It makes, and it leads to greater consequences within that person, because there's a reason why there's a reason why they're acting like this. So, you know, imagine if, let's say, the brain is somebody calling you, you know, and saying, you know, something is wrong, you know, I need help, you know, let's say your mother's calling you and saying, something's wrong, you know, something's gone wrong with the lights. You're going to try and go over and try to fix the lights or something. You're not going to cut the phone line, so that she can't call you, because then what happens if eventually all the lights turn off in the house, you know, or all the lights turn off all around you? It wouldn't be very good. There's a reason why we have these feelings. Usually, most of the time, of course, when it is just an imbalance and something's happening for no reason, that might be reasonable to have to use medications, or for doctors to prescribe this. But most of the time, and this is something that people don't want to hear, effort has to be put in, and saying this makes it seem as if another mosquito, not as if another mosquito, I was just pointing out there was another one, makes it seem as if that these people who have mental issues aren't putting in effort. It's not to suggest that at all, it's just to say that this effort is required and eventually it will pay off, rather than trying to go on to these medications, which will ultimately worsen things over time. I mean, a lot of people, it does serious damage to them in other ways psychologically, as we've seen. And as the mosquitoes keep coming out, I suppose I'll have to end it here.